The dust from the stagecoach wheels created clouds that hung in the August air like ghosts that refused to be laid to rest. And inside the rattling compartment, Fiona Fletcher pressed her palm against her rounded belly and let the tears stream down her cheeks in silent rivers of shame. She had boarded the coach in St. Louis 3 days prior, fleeing the whispers and pointing fingers that had turned her life into a living nightmare. At 22 years old, she was unmarried and 6 months pregnant, a scandal that had cost her everything she had ever known. Her father, a respected banker, had given her enough money to disappear and explicit instructions never to return. Her mother had wept but said nothing, too afraid of her husband's wrath to defend her only daughter. The man who had promised Fiona marriage and forever had vanished the moment she told him about the baby, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and this growing proof of her foolishness. The other passengers in the coach had kept their distance after one glance at her condition and bare ring finger. An older woman with a pinched face had actually moved to the opposite bench, gathering her skirts as though shame itself might be contagious. Fiona had stopped trying to hide her tears somewhere in Kansas. What did it matter now? Everyone who looked at her knew exactly what kind of woman she was, or at least what they assumed she was. The truth that she had believed every lie, every promise, every declaration of love seemed to matter to no one. The stagecoach was headed to Clifton Hill, Missouri, a small town near the western border where Fiona had secured employment through a desperate letter to a distant cousin. The position was as a seamstress in a boarding house, and her cousin had made it clear that Fiona would need to present herself as a widow. The lie had been carefully constructed in their correspondence. Fiona would be Mrs. Fletcher, tragically widowed when her dear husband had been killed in a factory accident back east. The baby would be her late husband's final gift. It was a thin story, one that would crumble under any real scrutiny, but it was all she had. The landscape outside the window had transformed from the rolling hills of eastern Missouri into something wilder and more untamed. Clifton Hill sat on the edge of what many still considered frontier country, though the year was 1876, and the West was slowly being tamed by railroads and settlements. Still, there were dangers out here that a woman alone needed to fear. Outlaws, harsh weather, the ever-present possibility of Indian attacks, though those had become less common in this part of Missouri. Fiona wiped at her tears with a handkerchief that had been white that morning, but was now gray with dust. She tried to compose herself, to build up the walls that would transform her from a ruined woman into a respectable widow. She would need to be convincing. Her entire future, and that of her child, depended on maintaining this fiction. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, and Fiona gasped as she was thrown against the side wall. The baby kicked in protest, a sensation that still filled her with a confusing mixture of love and despair. She loved this child already, loved it with a fierceness that surprised her, but every kick was also a reminder of how completely her life had been derailed. "Next stop, Clifton Hill," the driver called down, his voice rough from days of breathing dust. Fiona's heart began to race. This was it. The place where she would rebuild her life from the ashes of the old one. She smoothed down her dress, a simple brown traveling outfit that she had let out twice already to accommodate her changing shape. She adjusted her bonnet and tried to school her features into something approximating calm dignity. The town appeared gradually through the dusty window. Clifton Hill was larger than she had expected, with a proper main street lined with wooden buildings. She could see a general store, a saloon, what looked like a hotel, and various other establishments. There were people on the wooden sidewalks, going about their business in the late afternoon heat. It looked like a real town, not just some collection of shacks, and that gave her a small measure of hope. The stagecoach pulled to a stop in front of a building with a sign that read Stage Station and Telegraph Office. The driver climbed down, and Fiona could hear him speaking with someone outside. She gathered her small carpet bag, the only luggage she had brought with her. Everything else she owned had been sold or left behind. This bag contained 2 changes of clothes, her sewing kit, a few precious letters from her mother that had been written before the scandal, and a small painted miniature of her grandmother that was her only remaining connection to her family. The door opened, and the driver, a grizzled man with a tobacco-stained beard, peered in. "This is your stop, miss," he said, his tone neutral but not unkind. "Thank you," Fiona managed, her voice hoarse from disuse and crying. She accepted his hand to help her down from the coach, aware of how awkward her movements had become. Her back ached constantly now, and her ankles swelled in the heat. Stepping down onto the dusty street of Clifton Hill felt momentous, like crossing a threshold into a new life. The driver retrieved a small trunk from the back of the coach, the one containing the few household items she had managed to bring. "Where do you want this, miss?" Fiona looked around, suddenly uncertain. Her cousin was supposed to meet her, but she did not see any familiar faces in the small crowd that had gathered to watch the stagecoach arrive. "You Fiona Fletcher?" a voice asked. Fiona turned to see a thin woman in her 40s approaching. She had a severe face and wore a dress that had been mended multiple times. Her expression was not welcoming. "Yes," Fiona said. "Are you Mrs. Pemberton?" "That's right. I run the boarding house where your cousin said you'd be working." The woman's eyes traveled down to Fiona's belly and her lips pressed into a thin line. "She mentioned you were a widow, fresh one by the looks of it." "My husband passed 3 months ago," Fiona said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Right. Well, come on then, we've got a lot to discuss." Mrs. Pemberton's tone suggested that the discussion would not be pleasant. Fiona was about to follow when she heard a commotion behind her. She turned to see a group of men on horseback riding into town. They moved with the easy confidence of men who spent their lives in the saddle, and even a city girl like Fiona could recognize cowboys when she saw them. There were 5 of them, all dust-covered and trail-worn. They were heading toward the saloon, laughing and talking amongst themselves. Fiona was about to turn away when one of them looked directly at her. He was younger than the others, perhaps 25 or 26. He sat tall in the saddle, his hat pushed back to reveal dark hair and a tanned face. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Even from this distance, she could see they were a striking pale blue, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. More specifically, he was looking at her tears. She realized with horror that she was crying again, that the tears had started fresh when Mrs. Pemberton had looked at her with such cold judgment. She quickly raised her handkerchief to her face, but it was too late. He had seen. The cowboy said something to his companions and then turned his horse toward her. Fiona's heart began to pound. She did not need any more trouble, any more complications. She just needed to get to the boarding house and start building her new, quiet, invisible life. But he was already dismounting, handing his reins to one of the other men. He walked toward her with a loose, easy gait, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Fiona noticed he wore a gun on his hip, as most men did out here, but something about the way he carried himself suggested he was not looking for trouble. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he approached. His voice was deep and warm, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent time in the South. "I do not mean to intrude, but I could not help but notice you seem distressed. Is everything all right?" Up close, he was even more striking. His face was all strong lines and angles, weathered by sun and wind but still youthful. Those blue eyes held a kindness that Fiona had not seen directed at her in months. "I am fine, thank you," she said automatically, trying to turn away. "With respect, madam, you do not look fine." His gaze dropped briefly to her belly, then back to her face. Unlike Mrs. Pemberton's cold assessment or the other passengers' disgust, his expression held only concern. "Are you new in town? Do you have somewhere to go?" "She is with me," Mrs. Pemberton interjected, her tone sharp. "Come along, Fiona. We are wasting daylight." The cowboy's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Mrs. Pemberton. "You are Hattie Pemberton, are you not? You run that boarding house on Oak Street." "That is correct." "And this young woman is my new employee, so if you will excuse us." "I heard tell you work your girls pretty hard," the cowboy said, his voice still polite but with an edge to it now. "This lady looks like she needs rest, not a hard day's labor." "How I run my business is none of your concern, Vincent Brennan," Mrs. Pemberton snapped. "Now step aside." Vincent. So that was his name. Fiona filed it away even as she tried to move past him to follow Mrs. Pemberton and start her new life, but Vincent gently touched her arm. "Madam, wait just a moment." He looked directly into her eyes, and Fiona felt something shift inside her chest. "I do not know your circumstances, and I am not asking you to tell me, but I can see you are carrying a heavy burden. I want you to know that burden ends today." Fiona stared at him, confused. "I do not understand." "Mrs. Pemberton is not known for her kindness," Vincent said bluntly. "She works her employees hard and pays them little. If you are in a difficult situation, there might be other options, better options." "I have already made arrangements," Fiona said, though her resolve was weakening. There was something about this man, this stranger, that made her want to trust him. It was a dangerous impulse, given where trust had gotten her before. "Then unmake them." Vincent turned to Mrs. Pemberton. "How much was she going to pay you?" "Pay me?" Mrs. Pemberton's laugh was harsh. "She's going to work for room and board. I am doing her a favor, taking in a woman in her condition." "A favor?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Right. How much would you say room and board is worth per month?" "I do not see how that is any of your business." "Humor me." Mrs. Pemberton huffed. $20 if you must know. That is more than fair." Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out bills, the paper money crisp and clean. "Here is $80. 3 months room and board." He held the money out to Fiona. "Take it. Find yourself a proper place to stay, somewhere you will be treated with respect." Fiona's eyes widened. "I cannot possibly accept that. I do not even know you." "My name is Vincent Brennan. I am the foreman at the Double B Ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I have been working there for 6 years, and before that, I spent 3 years driving cattle up from Texas. I am 26 years old. I do not drink to excess. I attend church when I can, and I have never been arrested. There. Now you know me." His eyes crinkled at the corners, and Fiona realized he was trying to make her smile. Despite everything, despite the misery of the past months and the uncertainty of her future, she felt her lips twitch upward. "That is hardly a proper introduction." "Then let me buy you dinner and we can get properly introduced." Vincent was still holding out the money. "Please. I cannot in good conscience let you go work for Hattie Pemberton. She will work you until you drop, and in your condition, that could be dangerous." "You do not know anything about my condition," Fiona said, but her hand was moving toward the money almost of its own volition. "I know you are pregnant and alone and crying in the middle of the street in a strange town," Vincent said gently. "I know that you look like your world has ended. And I know that whatever happened to bring you here, you deserve better than Hattie Pemberton's so-called charity." Fiona took the money. Her hand shook as she folded the bills and tucked them into her pocket. "I will pay you back. Every cent." That is not necessary, but if it makes you feel better, we can consider it a loan." Vincent turned to Mrs. Pemberton, who was watching with a thunderous expression. "I apologize for interfering with your business, madam, but I think we can agree that Mrs. Fletcher has changed her mind about the position." "You will regret this," Mrs. Pemberton hissed at Fiona. "You think you are too good for honest work. We all know what you really are. A widow. Ha, that baby has no father, and everyone in this town will know it soon enough. You will be begging me for that job within a week." The words hit Fiona like physical blows. She felt her face burning with shame, felt the tears starting again. This was exactly what she had feared, exactly why she had run so far from home. The judgment, the scorn, the knowledge that everyone could see right through her. But before she could crumble completely, Vincent stepped between her and Mrs. Pemberton. His voice, when he spoke, was low and dangerous. "That is enough. You will not speak to her that way." "I will speak however I please. Everyone has a right to know what kind of woman she is. The only thing anyone needs to know is that she is a lady who deserves respect," Vincent said firmly. "And if I hear you spreading gossip about her, Mrs. Pemberton, I will make sure every cowboy in 3 counties knows to avoid your boarding house. The double B boys alone make up a good portion of your business. Think carefully before you make an enemy of me." Mrs. Pemberton's face went pale, then red. "You cannot threaten me." "That is not a threat. That is a simple statement of fact." Vincent's tone was calm, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more effective. "Now I suggest you get back to your boarding house. I am sure you have other business to attend to." Mrs. Pemberton turned on her heel and stalked away, her skirts kicking up dust. The small crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation began to disperse, though Fiona could see people whispering to each other. Wonderful. She had been in town less than an hour, and she was already the subject of gossip. Vincent turned back to her, his expression softening. "I am sorry about that. Hattie Pemberton has a sharp tongue, but most people in Clifton Hill are decent folk. They will judge you by your character, not by rumors." "She was right, though," Fiona said quietly. "I am not a widow, the baby's father." She could not finish the sentence. The humiliation was too great. "You do not owe me your story," Vincent said. "Not now, maybe not ever. That is your business, not mine." He picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing. "Now, let us get you settled somewhere proper. The Clifton Hill Hotel is respectable, and Mrs. Ortega, who runs it, is a kind woman. She will not judge you, and she keeps a clean establishment. Why are you doing this?" Fiona asked as she followed him down the street, her carpetbag clutched in her hand. "You do not know me. For all you know, Mrs. Pemberton was right about everything." Vincent stopped walking and looked at her. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his face, but his eyes were clear and direct. "My mother raised me by herself," he said quietly. "My father was a gambler who left when I was 2 years old. She worked herself to the bone to keep us fed and clothed, and she faced the same kind of judgment you are facing now. People assumed she must have done something wrong, must have driven him away. They whispered about her behind her back and treated her like she was less than human. But she was the strongest, most courageous person I ever knew." His voice caught slightly. "She died when I was 15, worked herself to death, essentially. And I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help a woman in a similar situation, I would do it. So that is why I am doing this. Because my mother deserved better, and so do you." Fiona felt tears streaming down her face again, but these were different. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something she had not felt in so long that she almost did not recognize it. "Hope." "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent smiled at her, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "You are welcome. Now come on. Let us get you a room and some food. You look like you have not eaten properly in days." He was right. The nausea that had plagued her early pregnancy had faded, replaced by constant hunger, but she had been too anxious and too poor to eat much during the journey. The thought of a proper meal made her stomach growl audibly. Vincent chuckled. "I will take that as agreement." The hotel dining room serves a good roast chicken. Best food in town. The Clifton Hill Hotel was a two-story building painted white, with a wide porch and rocking chairs out front. It looked clean and respectable, exactly the kind of place Fiona would never have been able to afford on her own. As they climbed the steps, she felt a pang of guilt about taking Vincent's money. She did not want to be in debt to anyone, did not want to be the object of anyone's charity. But what choice did she have? Mrs. Pemberton had been her only option, her only plan. Without Vincent's intervention, she would be in that boarding house right now, probably already scrubbing floors or doing laundry. And he was right that she needed rest. Her body ached, and the baby's movements had become more insistent, as though protesting the harsh treatment of the past few days. Inside, the hotel lobby was dim and cool after the bright heat of the street. There was a small desk with a brass bell, potted plants in the corners, and a worn but clean rug on the floor. A staircase led up to the second floor, and Fiona could see a doorway that probably led to the dining room Vincent had mentioned. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with dark hair streaked with gray and warm brown eyes. "Vincent Brennan. I have not seen you in weeks. How are things at the ranch?" "Good, Mrs. Ortega. We just finished moving the herd to the summer pasture." Vincent set down Fiona's trunk. "I have a favor to ask. This is Mrs. Fiona Fletcher. She is new in town and needs a room. Do you have anything available, Mrs.?" Ortega's eyes went to Fiona, taking in her tear-stained face and rounded belly. But unlike Mrs. Pemberton, her expression remained kind. "Of course. I have a lovely room on the second floor. It is quiet and gets a nice breeze in the evenings." She named a price that made Fiona wince. "I can pay for the first month now," Fiona said quickly, reaching for the money Vincent had given her. She did not want him thinking he had to support her completely. "That is fine, dear. Let me get you the key." Mrs. Ortega disappeared into the back room. Vincent leaned against the desk, studying Fiona. "You are going to need more than just a room. You will need clothes as the baby grows, supplies for when it comes, probably a doctor." "I will find work," Fiona said firmly. "I am a skilled seamstress." "Surely there is someone in town who needs that service." "There is, actually. Old Mrs. Chen, who runs the general store, does alterations, but her eyesight is not what it used to be. She has been complaining about needing help for months." Vincent rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Though she cannot pay much. I do not need much, just enough to support myself and the baby." Mrs. Ortega returned with a large iron key. "Room 7 at the top of the stairs and to the right. I will have my son bring up some fresh water for washing. Dinner is served at 6 if you are interested." "Thank you," Fiona said, taking the key. "You are very kind." "We all need a little kindness sometimes," Mrs. Ortega said with a smile. "Welcome to Clifton Hill, Mrs. Fletcher." Vincent picked up the trunk again. "I will help you get settled." Fiona wanted to protest, to tell him he had done enough already, but the truth was she could barely climb the stairs herself, let alone carry the trunk. She followed him up, her hand on the railing for support. Room 7 was small but clean, with a real bed, a washstand, a small table with a chair, and a wardrobe. There was a window that looked out over the main street, with lace curtains that stirred in the breeze. It was the nicest room Fiona had been in since leaving St. Louis. Vincent set the trunk at the foot of the bed. "It is not much, but it is better than Hattie Pemberton's boarding house." "It is wonderful," Fiona said honestly. She sat down on the bed, relief flooding through her as the weight came off her swollen feet. I do not know how to thank you for all of this. You do not need to thank me. Vincent moved toward the door, then hesitated. Mrs. Fletcher, Fiona, if it is all right to call you that. Yes, she said softly. I meant what I said earlier. Whatever burden you have been carrying, whatever shame you think you have, it ends today. You are in a new place with new people. You get to decide who you are here, not your past, not what happened before. You. Fiona looked at him, this stranger who had shown her more compassion in an hour than her own family had in months. Why do you believe that? That people can start over? Because I have seen it happen. The West is full of people reinventing themselves, becoming something different than what they were born to be. Cowboys who used to be shopkeepers, ranchers who used to be soldiers, farmers who used to be city men. Out here, what matters is what you do, not where you came from. I hope you are right, Fiona said. I am. Vincent smiled again. Now I have to get back to the ranch before the boss thinks I have abandoned my duties, but I will be back in town in a few days. I will check on you then, make sure you are settling in all right, and I will talk to Mrs. Chen about that seamstress position. You do not have to do that. I want to. He tipped his hat. Get some rest, Fiona. You look like you need it. After he left, Fiona sat in the quiet room for a long time, listening to the sounds of the town drifting through the window. Somewhere a dog was barking. She could hear the tinny sound of a piano from the saloon, voices calling to each other, the clip-clop of horses passing by. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby moving. We are going to be all right, she whispered. I do not know how yet, but we are going to be all right. For the first time in months, she actually believed it might be true. That evening, Fiona ventured downstairs for dinner. The dining room was half full, mostly with men who looked like traveling salesmen or ranch hands in town for the evening. She felt conspicuous as the only woman, and several of the men looked at her with curiosity, but no one bothered her. Mrs. Ortega herself brought out a plate of roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans. You eat up, dear. You are feeding too now. The food was delicious, better than anything Fiona had eaten in weeks. She had been surviving on bread and cheese during the stagecoach journey, unable to stomach anything heavier. But now her appetite had returned with a vengeance, and she cleaned her plate completely. Would you like some pie? Mrs. Ortega asked. I made apple this morning. That sounds wonderful, but I should not spend. It is included with the dinner. Mrs. Ortega winked. Vincent already paid for your meals for the week when you were upstairs. Fiona felt a surge of mixed emotions. Gratitude, certainly, but also frustration. She did not want to be a charity case, did not want to owe anyone anything. But she also could not afford to be proud right now. She had to think of the baby. He is very kind, she said carefully. Vincent is one of the good ones, Mrs. Ortega agreed. Hardworking, honest, treats everyone with respect. The Double B Ranch is lucky to have him. Owner Mr. Bradford says Vincent is the best foreman he has ever had. Cowboys respect him, cattle respond to him. He has a real gift for the work. Has he lived here long? About 6 years, as he probably told you. Came up from Texas with nothing but his horse and saddle. Mr. Bradford gave him a job as a regular cowhand, but Vincent worked his way up. Made foreman 3 years ago when old Charlie retired. Mrs. Ortega set down a generous slice of apple pie. He does not talk much about his past, but then, a lot of folks out here do not. What matters is who you are now, not who you were. There was that theme again. The chance to reinvent yourself, to be someone new. Fiona wanted desperately to believe in it. After dinner, she went back to her room and unpacked her few belongings. She hung her 2 dresses in the wardrobe, arranged her sewing kit on the table, and set her grandmother's miniature on the washstand where she could see it. The room immediately felt a little more like hers. She washed using the water Mrs. Ortega's son had brought up, grateful to finally remove days of travel dust from her skin. Then she put on her nightgown and climbed into bed. The mattress was softer than the hard benches of the stagecoach, and the pillow smelled like lavender. Fiona lay in the darkness, one hand on her belly, and thought about the day. This morning she had been filled with dread, certain that she was heading toward a life of drudgery and judgment. Now she was in a clean room with a full stomach, and she had met a man who had shown her unexpected kindness. Vincent Brennan. She thought about his blue eyes and the gentle way he had spoken to her. She thought about how he had stood up to Mrs. Pemberton, how he had carried her trunk without being asked, how he had shared the story of his mother. She thought about the words he had said. That burden ends today. Could it really be that simple? Could she really leave behind the shame and fear that had consumed her for months? Could she build a new life here in Clifton Hill, Missouri, on the edge of the frontier? The baby kicked, a strong thump against her ribs, and Fiona smiled in the darkness. "Your father does not want us," she whispered, "but we do not need him. We are going to be just fine on our own, and maybe, just maybe, they would not be entirely alone. Maybe there were good people in this world after all. People like Vincent Brennan, who helped for no reason other than it was the right thing to do." Fiona fell asleep with that thought, the first peaceful sleep she had had in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Fiona woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of the town coming to life below. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory returned, and she sat up slowly, her back protesting the movement. She dressed in her better dress, a gray cotton that was plain but respectable, and did her hair as neatly as she could without a proper mirror. Then she ventured downstairs, determined to begin establishing herself in this new town. Mrs. Ortega was in the lobby directing a young man in the cleaning of the windows. She smiled when she saw Fiona. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," Fiona admitted. "Mrs. Ortega, can you direct me to the general store? I believe there is a Mrs. Chen who does alterations." "Yes, that is right down the street. Can't miss it. Big sign that says Chen's General Store." Mrs. Ortega's eyes lit up. "Are you thinking of offering your services?" "Oh, that would be wonderful. Poor Mrs. Chen has been turning away work because she cannot keep up with the demand. I hope she will consider hiring me. I am a skilled seamstress, truly." "I am sure you are, dear. Mrs. Chen is a shrewd businesswoman, but she is fair. If you can do good work, she will hire you." Encouraged, Fiona walked down the main street toward the general store. In the morning light, Clifton Hill looked prosperous and well established. The buildings were mostly wood, but they were well maintained. She passed a blacksmith shop where a man was already at work, the clang of his hammer ringing out. There was a barber shop with a red and white pole, a land office, a small building that advertised itself as the office of an attorney and accountant. The general store was indeed impossible to miss, with a large painted sign and a wide front window displaying various goods. Fiona took a deep breath and pushed open the door, a bell jingling to announce her arrival. The interior was dimly lit after the bright sun outside, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. The store was packed with goods: barrels of flour and sugar, canned goods on shelves, farming implements hanging from hooks, bolts of fabric stacked on a table near the back. The air smelled like coffee and leather, and something spicy she could not identify. A tiny woman emerged from behind the counter. She could not have been more than 5 feet tall, and her hair was completely white despite the fact that her face suggested she was perhaps 60. She wore a simple dark dress and had a pair of spectacles perched on her nose. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her accent suggested she was not originally from America, and Fiona remembered Vincent had called her Mrs. Chen. Chinese, then, though Fiona had never actually met anyone from China before. "Good morning," Fiona said, trying to project confidence she did not feel. "My name is Fiona Fletcher. I am new in town, and I heard that you sometimes do alterations and mending. I am a trained seamstress, and I was wondering if you might need assistance." Mrs. Chen looked her up and down, her gaze sharp and assessing. "You are the girl who arrived on the stagecoach yesterday. The one Vincent Brennan helped, of course. Word traveled fast in a small town." "Yes, that is correct. I heard Hattie Pemberton is telling everyone you are a fallen woman, not a widow at all." Fiona's heart sank. So much for her fresh start. I made mistakes in my past, Mrs. Chen, but I am a hard worker and I need this job. I promise I would do excellent work." Mrs. Chen walked around the counter and approached Fiona. She was so small that she had to look up to meet Fiona's eyes. "Show me your hands." Confused, Fiona held out her hands. Mrs. Chen took them, turning them over, examining her fingers. "You have calluses from needlework. Good. I do not need someone who claims to sew but has never done real work." She released Fiona's hands. "Hattie Pemberton is a bitter woman who has never forgiven the world for her disappointments. I do not listen to her gossip, and neither do most sensible people in this town." Hope fluttered in Fiona's chest. "Then, you will consider hiring me." "I will do more than consider. I have 6 dresses waiting to be altered, 3 pairs of trousers that need mending, and a wedding dress that needs to be completed by the end of the month. I cannot do it all myself. My eyes are not what they used to be." Mrs. Chen named a wage that was modest but fair. "You can work in the back room during store hours. I provide the thread and needles. If customers like your work, the job continues. If they do not, you are dismissed." "Fair, more than fair," Fiona said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I promise you will not regret this." "I regret very few things in life, Mrs. Fletcher. I did not build a successful business by making poor decisions." Mrs. Chen gestured toward the back of the store. "Come, I will show you the workroom and the projects that need attention first." The workroom was a small space with a window that let in good light, a table, and a sewing machine that looked relatively new. There was also a dress form and a shelf full of fabric and supplies. It was cramped but functional, and Fiona felt a surge of excitement at the sight of it. "The wedding dress is most urgent," Mrs. Chen said, pulling out a partially completed white dress. "The bride is Sarah Miller, daughter of the banker. She wants lace on the sleeves and hem with pearl buttons down the back. Can you do that?" Fiona examined the dress, her trained eye assessing the work. "Yes, absolutely. This is beautiful fabric, French lace. Irish but very fine quality. The banker is sparing no expense for his daughter's wedding." Mrs. Chen watched as Fiona ran her fingers over the lace. "You know your fabrics." "My mother came from a wealthy family. She insisted I learn proper needlework, said it was a necessary skill for a lady." Fiona's voice caught slightly at the mention of her mother. "I never thought I would be using it to earn a living, but I am grateful for the training now." Skills are never wasted, even if we use them in unexpected ways. Mrs. Chen pulled out the other projects, showing Fiona what needed to be done with each one. "You can start today if you like. Most of the alterations are straightforward, but I want your best work on the wedding dress." "You will have it," Fiona promised. She spent the rest of the morning in the workroom, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. It felt good to be working, to be doing something useful instead of sitting in a stagecoach or lying in a hotel room worrying about the future. Her back ached from sitting, and the baby kicked occasionally as though protesting being confined, but Fiona was happier than she had been in months. At noon, Mrs. Chen brought her a sandwich and a cup of tea. You need to eat regularly in your condition. Thank you. How much do I owe you for the food? Nothing. I feed my employees. Mrs. Chen sat down on a stool studying Fiona. Your work is good. Very neat stitches, perfect tension. Where did you learn? My mother taught me the basics, and then I spent a year with a French dressmaker in St. Louis. She was very strict about technique. Fiona took a bite of the sandwich. Do you mind if I ask how you came to run a general store in Missouri? It must have been difficult, being so far from your homeland. Mrs. Chen's expression became distant. My husband and I came to America 30 years ago to work on the railroad. It was brutal work and many men died. But we survived, and when the railroad was completed, we came here. My husband opened this store and we built a life. He died 5 years ago and I have run it alone since then. I am sorry for your loss. I am sorry for yours, Mrs. Chen said, her eyes going to Fiona's belly. A child should have a father. Fiona looked down at her hands. There is no husband, there never was. I was engaged, or I thought I was, but when I told him about the baby. She could not finish. He abandoned you. Yes. Then he was a fool and you are better off without him. Mrs. Chen stood up. The child will have you and that is what matters most. A mother's love is worth more than a father's name. That is kind of you to say. It is not kindness, it is truth. I have seen many families in my years running this store. Some have 2 parents and are miserable. Some have 1 parent and are full of love. What matters is character, not circumstances. Mrs. Chen moved toward the door. Rest for a few more minutes, then back to work. That wedding dress will not sew itself. Fiona worked until late afternoon, her fingers flying over the delicate lace. She was attaching it to the sleeves when she heard the bell jingle in the main store, followed by a familiar deep voice. Good afternoon, Mrs. Chen. Is Mrs. Fletcher here? Fiona's heart gave an unexpected leap. Vincent had come back just as he had promised. She is in the workroom, Mrs. Chen replied, and doing excellent work, I might add. Footsteps approached and then Vincent appeared in the doorway. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his face freshly shaven and his hair combed back. He wore clean trousers and a shirt that looked like it had actually been ironed. He looked younger somehow, and Fiona felt her cheeks warming as he smiled at her. You took my advice about talking to Mrs. Chen, he said. I did. She hired me this morning. Fiona set down the wedding dress carefully. Thank you for the suggestion. I heard from Mrs. Ortega that you started work already. That is good. Vincent looked around the small workroom. This seems like a better situation than Hattie Pemberton's boarding house. Much better. Mrs. Chen is fair and kind. Fiona stood up, stretching her back. Did you need something, Mr. Brennan? Vincent, please. And yes, actually, I was wondering if you would have dinner with me this evening. There is a small restaurant at the edge of town, quieter than the hotel dining room. I thought you might appreciate getting to know someone in town, having a friend. A friend. That was what he was offering, nothing more. Fiona should be relieved, and part of her was. But another part of her, a part she tried to ignore, felt a small stab of disappointment. That is very thoughtful, she said. But I do not want to impose on your time. You have already done so much for me. You are not imposing, I asked, did I not? Vincent's blue eyes were warm. Besides, I would enjoy the company. Ranch life can be lonely. Most of my conversations are with cattle and horses, and they are not known for their sparkling wit. Fiona laughed, the sound surprising her. She could not remember the last time she had laughed. Well, in that case I accept. Though I should warn you that I am not particularly witty myself these days. I am sure you are better company than a cow, Vincent said with a grin. I will come by the hotel at 6. That would be lovely. After he left, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression knowing. That young man likes you. He is just being kind, Fiona protested. He helped his mother and he sees me as a similar situation. Perhaps, but I have been observing people for 60 years and I know the look of a man who is interested in a woman. Vincent Brennan looks at you like you are something precious. Mrs. Chen's smile was almost mischievous. And you look at him the same way, whether you know it yet or not. Fiona shook her head. I cannot think about such things. I am pregnant with another man's child. What kind of man would want that? The right kind of man does not care about the past. He cares about the future. Mrs. Chen patted Fiona's arm. Do not close your heart just because one person broke it. That is how we end up bitter and alone like Hattie Pemberton. Fiona returned to her sewing, but Mrs. Chen's words echoed in her mind. Was it possible that Vincent saw her as more than a charity case? And if he did, how did she feel about that? She was in no position to think about romance. Her life was complicated enough already. But when 6 o'clock came and she was back in her hotel room, she found herself taking extra care with her appearance. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up in a style that was more flattering than her usual simple bun. She wore her better dress and even dabbed a bit of rose water on her wrists, a luxury she had saved from her old life. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Her face was thinner than it had been, her eyes shadowed from stress and worry. But there was something else there too, something she had not seen in months, a spark of hope. Vincent was waiting in the hotel lobby, hat in hand. When he saw her coming down the stairs, his face lit up. You look lovely, he said simply. Thank you. Fiona felt ridiculously pleased by the compliment. Where is this restaurant you mentioned? It is called Maria's, run by a Mexican family who came up from Texas about 10 years ago. Best tamales you will ever eat. Vincent offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Fiona took it. They walked through the evening streets of Clifton Hill, the air finally cooling after the heat of the day. The restaurant was indeed at the edge of town, a small building with colorful painted shutters and the warm glow of lamplight spilling from its windows. The smell of cooking meat and spices made Fiona's mouth water. Inside, the tables were simple but clean, and the walls were decorated with woven blankets in bright patterns. A woman with a kind face and graying hair approached them, speaking rapid Spanish to Vincent. He responded in the same language, and Fiona was surprised by his fluency. You speak Spanish? She asked as they sat down at a corner table. Picked it up during my years in Texas. Most of the cowboys I worked with spoke it, and it was either learn or be left out of the conversation. Vincent smiled. Maria says she will bring us her specialty. I hope you do not mind spicy food. I am willing to try anything at this point. The baby seems to want me to eat everything in sight. That is good. You need to keep your strength up. Vincent's expression grew more serious. How are you feeling? I mean truly. Yesterday you seemed desperate, terrified. On the verge of collapse, Fiona supplied wryly. All of the above, I suppose. Today has been better. Having work helps, having a purpose. I am glad Mrs. Chen hired you. She is a good woman, even if she seems stern. She has been very kind. Everyone here has, except for Mrs. Pemberton. It is more than I expected. Fiona traced a pattern on the table with her finger. In St. Louis, once people found out about my situation, they treated me like I had some kind of disease. Even friends I had known for years crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. That says more about them than it does about you, Vincent said firmly. Does it? I made a terrible choice. I trusted someone I should not have. I was naive and foolish, and now I am paying the price. You are not the first person to trust the wrong person, and you will not be the last. That makes you human, not evil. Vincent leaned forward. Fiona, can I ask what happened? You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but sometimes it helps to talk about it. Fiona looked at him, at the genuine concern in his eyes, and made a decision. If there was going to be any kind of friendship between them, she owed him honesty. His name was Richard, she said quietly. Richard Hartford. He worked at my father's bank as a junior accountant. He was handsome and charming, and he paid attention to me in a way no one else ever had. We started meeting in secret because my father did not think he was good enough for me, did not have enough prospects. Richard said that once he made senior accountant, he would ask my father for permission to court me properly. She paused as Maria brought out plates of food, tamales wrapped in corn husks, rice, beans, and something that looked like a filled pastry. The smell was heavenly. Eat first, Vincent said. The story can wait. But now that Fiona had started, she found she wanted to finish. We started being intimate. He said we were as good as engaged, that it did not matter because we would be married soon anyway. I believed him. I believed everything he told me. She picked up her fork but did not eat. When I realized I was pregnant, I was scared but also happy. I thought he would marry me immediately. Instead, he told me I had misunderstood our relationship. He said he had never promised marriage, that I had assumed too much. He gave me $50 and told me to take care of the problem. Vincent's jaw tightened. What did your parents say? My mother cried. My father raged. They sent me to stay with an aunt while they tried to figure out what to do. The aunt suggested I go to a place that would handle things. But I could not do that. This baby was not to blame for my mistakes. Fiona finally took a bite of the tamale, barely tasting it. Eventually, my father decided the best solution was for me to disappear. He gave me money and a letter of introduction to my cousin here, with the understanding that I was never to contact them again. I had brought shame on the family, and the only way to fix it was to pretend I had never existed. That is unconscionable, Vincent said, anger clear in his voice. You are their daughter. I am their embarrassment. Fiona set down her fork. I do not blame them entirely. I did this to myself. I was the one who believed Richard's lies. I was the one who broke all the rules of proper behavior. The consequences are mine to bear. No. Vincent reached across the table and took her hand. The consequences should be Richard's to bear. He is the one who lied and manipulated you. He is the one who abandoned his responsibility. You were guilty of nothing more than loving and trusting, and those are not crimes. Fiona felt tears threatening again. You are very kind to say so. I am not being kind, I am being truthful. I wish I could find this Richard Hartford and teach him what it means to be a man. Vincent's grip on her hand tightened. But since I cannot do that, I will do the next best thing. I will help you build a new life here, one where you do not have to carry shame for someone else's failings. You said that yesterday, that my burden ends today. And I meant it. Vincent's thumb brushed across her knuckles, the gesture surprisingly intimate. You do not have to be alone in this, Fiona. I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust me after what happened with Richard. But I promise you, I am not like him. I do not make promises I cannot keep, and I do not abandon people who need help. Fiona looked into his blue eyes and saw only sincerity. She wanted desperately to believe him, to trust that there were good men in the world. But the wound Richard had left was still too fresh, too raw. I want to believe you, she said softly, but I cannot afford to make the same mistake twice. I have a child to think about now. I understand. Vincent released her hand, though he looked disappointed. I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking for the chance to prove myself over time. Let me be your friend, Fiona. Nothing more unless you decide you want it, but let me help you. Why? Fiona asked. I know you said you want to help because of your mother, but there is more to it than that. I can tell. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his plate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Because when I saw you crying on that stagecoach, something in my chest hurt. You looked so lost and alone, and all I could think was that nobody should have to feel that way. Nobody should have to carry that kind of pain by themselves." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I do not know if it is fate or chance or just luck that I happened to be riding into town at that exact moment, but I was there, and I saw you, and now I cannot just walk away and pretend I did not." Fiona's throat tightened. "That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." "Then let me keep being honest with you. Let me be someone you can count on." "All right," Fiona said, the word coming out barely above a whisper. "Friends." Vincent's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Friends." They spent the rest of the meal talking about lighter things. Vincent told her about life on the Double B Ranch, about the cattle drives and the daily work of managing a herd. Fiona told him about St. Louis, about the books she loved to read, and the plays she had seen before her life had fallen apart. It was easy, talking to Vincent. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh with stories about mishaps on the ranch. For a few hours, Fiona almost forgot about her troubles. She was just a woman having dinner with an interesting man, enjoying good food and better conversation. When they finally left the restaurant, night had fallen completely. The streets of Clifton Hill were quiet, lit by occasional lamps. Vincent walked her back to the hotel, their pace slow and comfortable. "Thank you for dinner," Fiona said as they reached the hotel steps. "And for listening. Thank you for trusting me with your story." Vincent hesitated, then said, "I will be back at the ranch for the next few days. We are branding calves and it is all hands work, but I will come into town on Saturday if you would like to have dinner again." "I would like that," Fiona said and realized she meant it. "Good." Vincent tipped his hat. "Good night, Fiona." "Good night, Vincent." She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the darkness. Then she went inside and climbed the stairs to her room, her mind whirling with thoughts and feelings she was not quite ready to examine. Mrs. Chen had said Vincent looked at her like she was something precious. Fiona did not know if that was true. But she knew that when she was with him, she felt safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. And that was dangerous, because safety could be just another illusion, another lie that would shatter when she trusted it. But as she got ready for bed, Fiona allowed herself a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, Vincent Brennan was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man who wanted to help. And if that was true, then perhaps her fresh start in Clifton Hill, Missouri, was not just possible but inevitable. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Fiona spent her mornings and afternoons in Mrs. Chen's workroom, sewing and altering and mending. The work was demanding but satisfying, and she found herself taking pride in each completed project. The wedding dress was progressing beautifully, the Irish lace looking delicate and elegant against the white silk. Word spread quickly that there was a skilled seamstress at the general store, and soon Fiona had more work than she could easily handle. Women came in wanting dresses altered to fit changing figures. Men brought in work shirts that needed mending, and one wealthy rancher's wife commissioned an entirely new dress for an upcoming party. Mrs. Chen watched all of this with approval. "I knew you would be good for business," she said one afternoon as yet another customer left with a satisfied smile. "You have a gift, Fiona, not just for sewing, but for making people feel heard and understood. Mrs. Whitman has been complaining about that dress for weeks, but you figured out exactly what was wrong with the fit and fixed it in an hour." "I enjoy the work," Fiona said honestly. "It feels good to be useful again." She had also begun to settle into life at the hotel. Mrs. Ortega treated her with motherly kindness, always making sure she had plenty to eat and that her room was comfortable. Other guests came and went, mostly traveling salesmen and occasional families passing through, and while they sometimes gave her curious looks, no one was outright rude. The exception was when she encountered Mrs. Pemberton on the street 2 days after her arrival. The older woman had looked her up and down with obvious disdain and said loudly, "I give you a month before everyone in this town knows what you really are. Vincent Brennan may have been fooled by your act, but the truth always comes out." Fiona had kept walking, refusing to engage, but the words had stung. Because Mrs. Pemberton was right about one thing, the truth would come out eventually. As her pregnancy progressed, as the baby came, people would count backwards and realize there had been no husband. Her fresh start was built on a foundation of lies, and she lived in constant fear that it would all come crashing down. On Saturday, Vincent returned to town as promised. Fiona had finished work early and was back at the hotel, changing into her better dress, when Mrs. Ortega knocked on the door. "Vincent Brennan is downstairs asking for you," she said with a knowing smile. "Shall I tell him you will be down shortly?" "Yes, please. Thank you, Mrs. Ortega." Fiona checked her reflection one more time. She was showing more now, her belly impossible to hide even with the fullness of her skirts. Would Vincent be put off by how much she had changed in just a week? Would he regret his offer of friendship now that the reality of her situation was becoming more obvious? But when she came downstairs, Vincent's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Fiona, you look well. The work must be agreeing with you." "It is. Mrs. Chen keeps me busy." Fiona smiled. "Where are we going this evening?" "I thought we might take a walk if you are up for it. There is a spot by the river just outside town that is beautiful at sunset. We could have a picnic." A picnic. It sounded lovely and normal, and like something a regular person would do, not someone whose life had been turned upside down. "That sounds wonderful." They walked through town and out along a dirt road that led toward the Missouri River. The evening was pleasant, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of grass and water. Vincent carried a basket that he said Maria had packed for them, and he matched his pace to Fiona's slower one without comment. "How was the branding?" Fiona asked. "Hot, dirty, and exhausting like it always is. But we got through the whole herd and only lost 2 calves to illness. That is better than last year." Vincent's face was animated as he talked about the ranch. "We have good grazing land this summer, plenty of water. Mr. Bradford thinks we might be able to expand the herd next year if the market prices stay good. You really love the work, do not you?" "I do. There is something honest about it. You work hard, you do your job well, and the results are clear. The cattle are healthy or they are not. The ranch makes a profit or it does not. There are no politics, no social games, just the work itself." Vincent glanced at her. "I suppose that sounds simple-minded to someone from the city." "Not at all. It sounds refreshing, actually. In St. Louis, everything was about appearances and what people thought. Nothing was ever straightforward." Fiona touched her belly without thinking. "I suppose that is how I got into trouble. I did not know how to tell the difference between truth and performance." "Richard sounds like he was very good at performing," Vincent said, his tone carefully neutral. "He was. He said all the right things, acted exactly as a gentleman should in public. It was only later that I realized none of it was real." Fiona sighed. "I was so desperate to be loved, to be seen as special, that I ignored every warning sign. My mother tried to tell me to be careful, but I did not listen. We all have regrets about choices we have made. That is part of being human." They reached the spot Vincent had mentioned, a place where the river widened and there was a grassy bank shaded by cottonwood trees. The water sparkled in the evening light, and in the distance, Fiona could see rolling hills covered in prairie grass. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "I thought you might like it." Vincent spread out a blanket he had brought and began unpacking the basket. Maria sent tamales again, plus some kind of rice dish and fresh bread. "She seems to think I do not eat enough." They sat on the blanket, watching the river flow past. Fiona accepted a plate of food, but she was more interested in the view than eating. "It is so peaceful here, so different from the city." "Do you miss it, St. Louis?" "I miss what I thought my life would be. I miss feeling safe and secure, but the city itself, no. Everyone there knew my business, knew my shame. Here, at least, I have a chance to start over." She looked at Vincent. "Though Mrs. Pemberton seems determined to ruin that." Vincent's expression darkened. "She has been spreading gossip. I heard she told several people that I am not really a widow, that I am a fallen woman trying to trick respectable folk." Fiona's voice caught. "The worst part is that she is right. I am lying to everyone. You are protecting yourself and your child. That is not the same as lying out of malice." Vincent set down his plate and turned to face her fully. "Fiona, I have been thinking about this a lot, about your situation and how precarious it is. And I have an idea, but I do not want you to think I am trying to take advantage." Fiona's heart began to race. "What kind of idea?" Vincent took a deep breath. "Marry me." For a moment, Fiona could not process the words. They made no sense strung together like that. "What? Marry me?" Vincent repeated, his voice steady. "It would solve everything. You would be a respectable married woman. The baby would have a father's name. No one could spread gossip about you because there would be nothing to gossip about." Fiona stared at him. "You cannot be serious. We barely know each other. And I am pregnant with another man's child. I know all of that. But think about it practically. You need protection and respectability. I can provide both. We get along well, we enjoy each other's company. It could work. You would marry me out of practicality." Fiona could not keep the hurt out of her voice. For a moment, when he had said those words, her foolish heart had leaped with hope. But of course, it was not a real proposal. It was a business arrangement. Vincent reached for her hand. "Not just practicality. I care about you, Fiona. I know it has only been a week, but I feel something when I am with you, something I have never felt before. I wake up thinking about whether you are all right, wondering if you have eaten enough, hoping you are happy. And when I am with you, I feel complete somehow. Like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." Fiona's breath caught. "Vincent, I am not saying I am in love with you, not yet. It is too soon for that, but I think I could be. I think I am already halfway there." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "So yes, marrying you would solve practical problems. But it would also give me the chance to be with someone I already care for deeply, someone I want to know better." "This is insane," Fiona whispered. "People do not get married after knowing each other a week." "Sure they do. Out here, people get married for all kinds of reasons. Land, money, convenience. At least we actually like each other." Vincent's expression grew more serious. "I am not asking for an answer tonight. Take time to think about it. But Fiona, I promise you this. If you marry me, I will be a real husband to you. I will provide for you and the baby. I will protect you both. And I will never, ever abandon you the way Richard did. That is not the kind of man I am." Fiona pulled her hand away, needing space to think. Her mind was whirling. Marriage to Vincent would solve all her problems, that much was true. She would be respectable, secure. The baby would have a father, even if that father was not its biological parent. She would no longer have to lie or hide or fear discovery. But what about Vincent? What would he get out of this arrangement? A ready-made family, a wife who was damaged goods, a child that was not his own. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You could have any woman you want. You are handsome and kind and hardworking. Why tie yourself to someone like me?" Someone like you, Vincent repeated. You mean someone intelligent and talented and brave enough to start over in a new place despite being terrified. Someone who works hard and treats people with kindness even when they do not deserve it. Yeah, I can see why that would be unappealing. You know what I mean. I am pregnant and unmarried. I am ruined in the eyes of society. You could find someone without complications. I do not want someone without complications. I want you. Vincent said it so simply, so matter-of-factly that it took Fiona's breath away. I cannot explain it rationally. I just know that when I saw you crying on that stagecoach, something in me recognized something in you. Like we were meant to meet. And every time I am with you, that feeling gets stronger. Fiona felt tears streaming down her face. What if I cannot give you what you want? What if my heart is too broken to love again? Then we will fix it together, or we will live with it broken. Either way, we will do it together. You make it sound so easy. It is easy. The hard part is believing that good things can happen after bad things, but they can, Fiona. I am living proof. My father abandoned me, my mother died, and I was alone at 15 with nothing. But I survived and I built a good life. You can do the same. Fiona looked out at the river, watching the water flow endlessly past. Life was like that, she thought. It kept moving forward whether you were ready or not. She could stay frozen in her pain and fear, or she could take a chance on something new. Can I really think about it? She asked. You will not be angry if I need time. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. Vincent smiled. Though I will admit, I am hoping you say yes. They finished their picnic as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Vincent told her more about his life, about growing up in Texas and learning to be a cowboy. Fiona shared memories of her childhood, before everything had gone wrong. When they finally walked back to town, the stars were beginning to appear. Vincent left her at the hotel with a gentle kiss on her forehead, the kind of gesture that felt almost brotherly except for the way his hand lingered on her cheek. Think about what I said, he murmured. And remember, whatever you decide, I am still your friend. That night, Fiona lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind refusing to settle. Marriage to Vincent. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Men like Vincent did not propose to women like her. There had to be something she was missing, some reason he was offering this. But when she ran through their conversations, examined his actions, she could find nothing sinister or suspicious. He had been nothing but kind and honest from the moment they met. If he said he cared for her, maybe he actually did. The baby kicked, and Fiona put her hand on her belly. "What do you think?" she whispered. "Should we trust him?" Another kick, stronger this time. Fiona took it as a yes. Over the next week, Fiona thought about little else besides Vincent's proposal. She continued her work at the general store, continued to establish herself in Clifton Hill. But her mind was always circling back to the same question. Should she marry Vincent Brennan? Mrs. Chen noticed her distraction. "You are working well, but your mind is elsewhere," she observed one afternoon. "Is something troubling you?" Fiona hesitated, then decided she needed advice from someone with more life experience. "Mrs. Chen, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "How did you know your husband was the right man to marry?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Ah, so Vincent has proposed. How did you know?" "I told you. I have been observing people for 60 years. And Vincent Brennan has been looking at you like a man in love since the day you arrived." Mrs. Chen set down the dress she had been examining. "To answer your question, I knew my husband was right for me because he treated me like an equal. In China, women are not valued highly. In America, Chinese people are not valued highly. But my husband saw me as a person, not just a woman or just Chinese. He listened to my opinions, He respected my intelligence. He worked beside me rather than expecting me to serve him. That is how I knew. Vincent has been very kind, Fiona admitted, but kindness is not the same as love. No, but it is the foundation of love. Romance fades, passion cools. What remains is how two people treat each other day by day. Mrs. Chen looked at Fiona intently. The question is not whether Vincent is perfect. The question is whether he is good. Is he kind? Is he honest? Is he reliable? Because if he is those things, the rest can be built. He is all of those things, Fiona said softly. But I am so afraid of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person again. Vincent is not Richard. Surely you can see that. I can. But what if I am wrong again? What if I bring him into my mess and end up ruining his life too? Mrs. Chen sighed. You cannot live your life in fear of what might go wrong. Sometimes you have to take a chance, even when you are scared. Especially when you are scared. That is how we grow. That evening, Vincent came to town again. He had been making excuses to ride in every few days, always bringing small gifts. A book he thought Fiona might enjoy, fresh vegetables from the ranch garden, a carved wooden toy for the baby that one of the older cowboys had made. They walked together down by the river again, which was becoming their special place. The evening was warm, and Fiona could hear frogs singing in the reeds. Have you thought more about my proposal? Vincent asked after they had been walking in comfortable silence for a while. I have thought of little else, Fiona admitted. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I have so many questions. Ask them. I will answer honestly. If we married, what would you expect from me? As a wife, I mean. Vincent considered this carefully. I would expect partnership. Someone to share my life with, to talk to at the end of the day, to make decisions with. I would expect you to be faithful, which I know goes without saying. And I would expect you to let me help you, to not try to carry everything alone. And, physically. Fiona felt her cheeks burning, but she needed to know. I will not lie and say I do not want that eventually, but not until you are ready. Not until after the baby comes and you have healed, and not until you actually want it, not just feel obligated. Vincent's gaze was steady. I am not Richard, Fiona. I am not trying to trick you into anything. If we marry, it will be a real marriage, but on your timeline. Fiona felt something loosen in her chest. What about the baby? Would you truly be able to think of it as yours? I have been thinking about that a lot. Vincent ran a hand through his hair. I never knew my father. As far as I am concerned, the man who raises a child is the real father, not the man who happened to be there at conception. If I marry you, that baby becomes mine in every way that matters. I will love it, I will provide for it, I will teach it and protect it. It will be our child, yours and mine. Tears were streaming down Fiona's face now. How can you be so good, so willing to give everything and ask for so little in return? I am not a saint, Fiona. I am a selfish man who wants you in his life, and if taking on a child is part of that bargain, then so be it. Though honestly, it does not feel like a bargain, it feels like a gift. Fiona took a shaky breath. I am still so scared. I know, but let me be scared with you, let me share the burden. Vincent took her hands in his. Marry me, Fiona, I promise you will never regret it. And in that moment, standing by the river in the fading light, Fiona made a decision. Maybe it was foolish, maybe she would regret it. But Mrs. Chen was right. She could not live her whole life in fear. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Vincent's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He swept her up in his arms, careful of her belly, and spun her around. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands. You will not regret this, I swear it. Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like the kisses Richard had given her. Those had been demanding, taking. This was gentle, giving, a question rather than a statement. Fiona felt herself melting into it, felt her broken heart beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, it could heal after all. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "How soon can we make this official? I do not want to give you time to change your mind." Fiona laughed, the sound surprised out of her. "I will not change my mind. But we should probably wait at least a little while. People will talk if we marry too quickly." "Let them talk. I do not care." But Vincent's expression grew more thoughtful. "Though I suppose you are right, we should do this properly. I will speak to Reverend Miller tomorrow, see when he can perform the ceremony." 2 weeks? That seems fast. Every day that you are not my wife feels like wasting time. Vincent took her hand. "Besides, the sooner we marry, the sooner people will stop questioning your respectability. We need to do this before the baby comes." He was right, of course. Fiona was 6 months along now. They had perhaps 3 months before the baby arrived, and she would rather be established as Mrs. Brennan long before then. 2 weeks, then, she agreed. "But Vincent, I have nothing for a wedding. No dress, no family, nothing. You have me. That is all that matters, though." Vincent grinned. "I bet Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Ortega would be thrilled to help plan a wedding. Small-town folk love a celebration." He was right about that, too, when Fiona told Mrs. Chen the news the next day. The older woman actually clapped her hands together. "I knew it. I knew that boy would propose and you would accept." Mrs. Chen immediately started planning. "We will make you a dress, something simple but beautiful, and we will have a small reception at the hotel. Mrs. Ortega will love being involved." "I do not want any fuss," Fiona protested weakly. "Every bride deserves a proper wedding. Let us do this for you." Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled. "Besides, it will be good for you to have the town see you married respectably. It will silence certain gossiping tongues." Meaning Mrs. Pemberton, of course. Fiona had to admit there was a certain satisfaction in the thought of becoming a respectable married woman, proving the bitter woman wrong. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Mrs. Chen helped Fiona create a simple but elegant dress in pale blue, since white seemed inappropriate given her circumstances. Mrs. Ortega insisted on hosting a small reception in the hotel dining room, and before Fiona knew it, half the town was involved in planning. Vincent came to town every evening, and they spent hours talking and planning their future. He had a small house on the ranch property, one of the benefits of being foreman, and he was making it ready for Fiona and the baby. He described it with such pride. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, even a small porch where they could sit in the evenings. "It is not fancy," he said, "but it is solid and clean, and it is ours. Ours." The word made Fiona's heart flutter. After so long feeling alone and cast out, she was going to belong somewhere again. Belong to someone who actually wanted her. She also got to know more about Vincent's life on the ranch. He introduced her to his boss, Mr. Bradford, a gruff but kind man in his 50s who shook Fiona's hand and said, "Vincent is like a son to me. If he is happy, I am happy. Welcome to the Double B family." The other cowboys at the ranch were equally welcoming, if a bit awkward around a pregnant woman. They tipped their hats and called her madam and promised to help Vincent fix up the house however she wanted. Fiona also met the few other families that lived on ranch property. A young couple with 3 children, an older man and his wife who managed the chickens and vegetable garden, and a widow who cooked for the ranch hands. They all made Fiona feel welcome, never once asking uncomfortable questions about her past. The wedding was held on a Sunday afternoon in the small church at the edge of Clifton Hill. Reverend Miller was a kind man who seemed to sense Fiona's nervousness and kept the ceremony brief and simple. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Ortega stood as witnesses, along with Mr. Bradford. Fiona wore her blue dress with her hair pinned up and adorned with wildflowers that Vincent had picked that morning. Vincent wore a new shirt and had actually gotten a proper haircut for the occasion. He looked handsome and nervous and so sincere that Fiona felt her eyes filling with tears before the ceremony even began. When it came time for the vows, Vincent's voice was strong and clear. "I, Vincent Brennan, take you, Fiona Fletcher, to be my wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for as long as we both shall live." Fiona's voice shook as she repeated the words, but she meant everyone. This man had saved her, had given her a future when she had thought she had none. She would spend the rest of her life being grateful for that. When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Fiona felt something break open inside her chest. It was not quite love yet, but it was the beginning of it. The seed that would grow into something real and lasting. The reception at the hotel was small but joyful. Mrs. Ortega had prepared a feast, and Maria had contributed several Mexican dishes. There was cake and music from a fiddle player, and for a few hours, Fiona forgot all her troubles. She was just a bride celebrating her wedding, surrounded by people who wished her well. Mrs. Pemberton had not been invited, of course, but Fiona spotted her watching from across the street, her face pinched with disapproval. Let her watch, Fiona thought with satisfaction. Let her see that I am respectable now, that I have a husband who loves me. Because despite the short courtship, despite the practical reasons for their marriage, Vincent did love her. Fiona could see it in the way he looked at her, the way his hand constantly sought hers, the way he smiled every time someone called her Mrs. Brennan, and she was beginning to love him too. How could she not? He was everything Richard had pretended to be and more. Kind, honest, hardworking, generous. He made her laugh and made her feel safe. He talked to her like an equal and listened when she spoke. He was, quite simply, the best man she had ever known. As the sun set and the reception wound down, Vincent leaned close and whispered, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Brennan?" Mrs. Brennan. Her new name, her new identity. Fiona smiled. "Yes, let us go home." They rode to the ranch in a wagon Vincent had borrowed, Fiona's few belongings packed in the back. The house was only 5 miles from town, but it felt like entering a different world. The ranch spread out under the vast Missouri sky, rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The house was exactly as Vincent had described, small, solid, clean. But he had also added touches to make it welcoming. There were wildflowers in a vase on the kitchen table, curtains that looked newly hung in the windows, a rocking chair on the porch that Fiona suspected was meant for when the baby came. "What do you think?" Vincent asked, suddenly nervous. "I know it is not what you are used to." "It is perfect," Fiona said honestly. "It is more than perfect. It is home." Vincent carried her over the threshold, making her laugh at the sentimental gesture. He set her down gently in the main room, which served as both kitchen and living area. There was a fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a couple of comfortable-looking armchairs. "Bedroom is through there," Vincent said, gesturing to a door. I can sleep out here if you prefer. I meant what I said about not pushing you." Fiona looked at this man who had married her, taken on her and her unborn child, given her everything and asked for nothing. She thought about how Richard had taken and given nothing back. She thought about how different this felt, how safe. "We are married," she said softly. "We should share a room, can we take things slowly as you need?" Vincent took her hand. "I am in no hurry, Fiona. We have the rest of our lives." The rest of our lives. It sounded like a promise and a gift all at once. That night, they lay together in Vincent's bed, Fiona curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders. They talked quietly about their hopes and plans until Fiona's eyes grew heavy. Just before she drifted off to sleep, she felt Vincent press a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you," he murmured, "for taking a chance on me." "Thank you," Fiona whispered back, "for seeing me when I needed to be seen." The next few months were the happiest Fiona had ever known. She settled into life on the ranch, learning the rhythms of a place so different from the city she had grown up in. She cooked and cleaned and kept house, but she also continued her sewing work, with customers willing to make the trip to the ranch or to have their items delivered through Mrs. Chen. Vincent was gone during the days, working with the cattle and the other cowboys. But every evening he came home to her, and they would sit on the porch and talk about their days. He told her about the work, about the cattle and the land and the other men. She told him about her sewing projects, about letters from Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Ortega, about the way the baby was growing stronger and more active. Slowly, carefully, they were building a real marriage. Not the passionate, consuming thing she had thought she had with Richard, but something deeper and more solid. They were becoming partners, friends, and eventually, lovers. It happened naturally about a month after their wedding. Fiona woke in the night to find Vincent watching her, his expression tender in the moonlight. "What is wrong?" she whispered. "Nothing. Everything is right." He touched her face gently. "I love you, Fiona. I know I did not say it before, did not want to rush you, but I love you. I think I have from the moment I saw you crying on that stagecoach." Fiona felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. "I love you too. I did not think I could after what happened, but Vincent, I love you so much it scares me. Do not be scared. I have got you. I will always have you." They came together that night with a tenderness that made Fiona understand the difference between what she had done with Richard and what making love truly meant. This was not about taking or using. It was about giving, about trust, about two people becoming one. Afterward, lying in Vincent's arms, Fiona finally felt the last of her shame fall away. She was not ruined. She was not broken. She was loved and she was whole. 2 months later, on a hot August night that was almost exactly a year since she had arrived in Clifton Hill, Fiona went into labor. Vincent had been prepared for this, had arranged for the widow who cooked for the ranch to come stay with them and help with the birth. But nothing could have prepared Fiona for the intensity of it, the pain and the fear and the overwhelming sense that her body was doing something both terrible and miraculous. She gripped Vincent's hand so hard she was sure she must be hurting him, but he never complained. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You are so strong, Fiona. You can do this." And she did. After hours of labor that felt like an eternity, the baby finally came into the world with a loud, angry cry. The widow wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and laid it on Fiona's chest. "A boy," she announced with a smile. "A big, healthy boy." Fiona looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and utterly perfect. Her son. After everything she had been through, all the pain and fear and shame, here was this beautiful little person who had been worth it all. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "I am your mama." Vincent was looking down at the baby with an expression of such wonder that it made Fiona's heart clench. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Can I?" Fiona carefully transferred the baby to Vincent's arms. He held the child with surprising confidence for someone who had never held a newborn before, his large hands gentle and sure. "Hello, little one," Vincent said softly. "I am your father, your real father, and I am going to love you and protect you for as long as I live." Tears streamed down Fiona's face as she watched her husband with their son. Because that was what they were, husband and wife, mother and father. It did not matter that Vincent and the baby shared no blood. This was their family, built on love and choice rather than biology. "What should we name him?" Vincent asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son's face, Fiona knew exactly what felt right. "Henry," she said. "After your mother's father, you said he was a good man." Vincent's eyes filled with tears. "You remembered that." "I remember everything you have told me." Fiona reached out and took Vincent's hand. "Henry Brennan, what do you think?" "I think it is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." Vincent leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you, Fiona, for saying yes that day by the river. For giving me this family. For loving me." "Thank you," Fiona whispered back. "For seeing my tears and saying my burden ends today. For meaning it." Little Henry grew quickly, a healthy baby with his mother's dark hair and, surprisingly, Vincent's blue eyes. The widow speculated it was coincidence, but Fiona preferred to think of it as fate. This child was always meant to be Vincent's son. The ranch community embraced Henry completely. The cowboys treated him like a mascot, taking turns holding him and promising to teach him to ride as soon as he was old enough. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Ortega visited frequently, bringing gifts and advice. Even Mr. Bradford was smitten, declaring that Henry would make a fine rancher someday. Fiona had never imagined she could be this happy. Her days were full of work, but also full of love. Vincent was an attentive husband and a devoted father, always finding time to help with Henry despite his demanding work. He would come home exhausted and dusty, but he always took the baby so Fiona could have a break, walking Henry around the room and singing cowboy ballads in his deep voice. On Henry's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Ortega came out to the ranch, along with Mr. Bradford and several of the cowboys. There was cake and presents and laughter. Henry, who had just started taking his first wobbly steps, toddled around with everyone watching proudly. As the sun set and their guests began to leave, Vincent pulled Fiona aside. "I have been thinking," he said. "Henry should have a brother or sister. What do you think? Are you ready for another one?" Fiona laughed, pressing close to her husband. "I think that sounds perfect. Though maybe let us enjoy Henry being little for a bit longer." "Fair enough." Vincent wrapped his arms around her, and they stood together watching Henry play with his new toys. "Can you believe it has been a year since we married? Feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once." "I know what you mean." Fiona turned in his arms to face him. "Vincent, I need to tell you something." He looked concerned. "What is it?" "When I rode that stagecoach to Clifton Hill, I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left, no future, no hope. I was carrying so much shame that I could barely breathe under the weight of it." Fiona's voice shook with emotion. "And then you saw me. You saw my tears, and instead of judging me, instead of looking away, you said those words, 'That burden ends today.' And you meant it, Vincent. You took my burden and you carried it with me until I was strong enough to put it down. You gave me everything, a home, a family, love. You gave me back my life. Fiona." Vincent's own voice was rough with emotion. "Let me finish. I need you to know that I do not just love you because you rescued me. I love you because of who you are. Because you are kind and honest and good. Because you make me laugh and make me feel safe. Because you are the best father Henry could ever have. Because when I imagine the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it." She touched his face. "You are my husband, my partner, my best friend. And I thank God every day that you rode into Clifton Hill on that particular day, that you saw me crying, that you decided to help. Because you changed everything, Vincent. You saved me." Vincent kissed her then, deep and tender, a kiss full of promise and love. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You saved me too," he whispered. "I did not even know I was lonely until I met you. Did not realize how empty my life was. You and Henry, you make everything make sense. You are my purpose, my joy, my everything." They stood together as the stars began to appear in the vast Missouri sky, their son playing happily nearby, their home solid and warm behind them. Fiona thought about how far she had come from that desperate, crying girl on the stagecoach. She thought about the burden she had carried and the man who had helped her put it down. The Wild West could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be a place of second chances, of reinvention, of finding family where you least expected it. Fiona had learned that lesson well. She had come to Clifton Hill alone and ashamed, and she had found love and belonging and a future brighter than anything she could have imagined. Over the next 5 years, Fiona and Vincent's family grew. Henry was joined by a daughter they named Rose, and then another son they called James. The little house on the ranch filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Vincent continued to work as foreman, and when Mr. Bradford retired, he sold a portion of the ranch to Vincent at a very favorable price. Vincent and Fiona became landowners, ranchers in their own right. It was hard work, but they thrived on it. Fiona's sewing business also grew. She trained several young women in the craft, creating jobs for others while building a small enterprise. Mrs. Chen eventually sold her business and retired, leaving Fiona with a well-established clientele and a reputation for quality work. But more than any material success, what Fiona treasured most was the love she shared with Vincent and their children. She watched Henry grow into a kind, responsible boy who loved nothing more than riding with his father. Rose was spirited and clever, always asking questions and helping her mother with sewing projects. Little James was still a baby, but he already showed signs of having his father's calm temperament. On their 6th anniversary, Vincent took Fiona back to the spot by the river where he had proposed. They sat on the bank watching the water flow past, just as they had done so many times before. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" Vincent asked. "You said a lot of things that first day," Fiona replied with a smile. "I said that burden ends today, that whatever shame you were carrying, it stopped right then." Vincent took her hand. "Did it? Does it feel like it ended?" Fiona thought about this carefully. "Yes," she finally said. "Not all at once, but gradually. Every day with you and the children, I felt it lifting. The shame, the fear, the sense that I had ruined everything. It all faded away until one day I realized it was simply gone. I was just Fiona Brennan, wife and mother and businesswoman. The past stopped mattering. Good. That is all I ever wanted for you. You gave me so much more than that." Fiona leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder. "You gave me a real life, Vincent. Not the life I thought I wanted when I was a girl in St. Louis, but something so much better. Something authentic and full of love." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could see the ranch house with smoke rising from the chimney. Inside, Mrs. Ortega was watching the children, giving Vincent and Fiona this time alone together. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not been riding into town that day?" Vincent asked. "If someone else had been on that corner when your stagecoach arrived?" "I try not to," Fiona admitted, "because the alternative is too awful to contemplate. You saved me, Vincent. I do not just mean from Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house. You saved me from despair, from self-hatred, from a life spent believing I was worthless. You saw something in me worth saving when I could not see it myself. You were always worth saving. I just helped you see it." Fiona turned to look at her husband, at this man who had become her whole world. His face was more weathered now from years of ranch work, with fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. But those blue eyes were the same as they had been 6 years ago, kind, honest, full of love. "I want you to know something," she said seriously. If I could go back and change things, prevent what happened with Richard, erase the whole scandal, I would not do it. Vincent looked surprised. Really? Really? Because all of that pain, all of that shame, it led me here, to you, to our family, and I would not trade this life for anything. Fiona touched his face. Henry, Rose, and James are my children, and I love them with all my heart. And Henry is ours just as much as the other two. But if things had been different, if I had never gotten pregnant, if Richard had been a better man, I never would have left St. Louis. I never would have gotten on that stagecoach. I never would have met you. Vincent pulled her close, holding her tightly. I am glad you rode that stagecoach. Even though I hate what you went through, I am grateful it brought you to me. Me too. They rode back to the ranch as the stars appeared, their horses moving easily through the familiar terrain. When they reached the house, they could hear their children inside, laughing at something Mrs. Ortega was telling them. Vincent helped Fiona down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. Ready to go face the chaos, Fiona smiled. Always, as long as you are with me. They walked inside together, hand in hand, into the warmth and noise and love of their home. The children ran to greet them, all talking at once, and Fiona scooped up Rose while Vincent lifted James. Henry stayed close, already at the age where he thought he was too old for such displays, but still clearly happy his parents were home. Later, after the children were in bed and Mrs. Ortega had gone home, Vincent and Fiona sat on their porch in the cool evening air. This had become their tradition, this quiet time together after the demands of the day. You think Henry will ever ask, Fiona said quietly, about his real father? It was something they had discussed before, but never fully resolved. Henry looked enough like both of them that strangers never questioned his parentage. But someday he might wonder, might do the math and realize he was born too soon after their marriage. If he does, we will tell him the truth, Vincent said firmly. That his biological father was not a good man, but that I am his real father in every way that matters, that we love him completely and nothing about his origins changes that. What if he wants to find Richard? To know where he came from. Then we will deal with that if it happens. But Fiona, Henry is my son. I was there when he was born. I held him first. I taught him to walk and ride and be kind to others. Richard Hartford is just a name, a mistake from your past. He has no claim on Henry. Fiona felt tears in her eyes. Thank you for never making me feel like I need to apologize for him, for loving Henry exactly as much as you love Rose and James. There is nothing to apologize for, and I do love them all the same. They are my children, all three of them. Vincent pulled Fiona close. That is what family means, is not it? Not just blood, but choice and love and commitment. Yes, Fiona agreed softly. That is exactly what it means. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The cattle were quiet in their pastures, the ranch settled for the night. Fiona thought about the girl she had been, crying on that stagecoach, certain her life was over. She thought about how terrified she had been, how ashamed, how convinced that she would never be happy again. And she marveled at how wrong she had been. Because here she was, 6 years later, living a life she loved with a man she adored and children who filled her days with joy. Here she was, respected in her community, successful in her business, content in her heart. Here she was, happy. What are you thinking about? Vincent asked, noticing her faraway expression. About how that burden really did end that day, just like you said it would. About how I found something better than I ever could have imagined when I gave up on my old dreams. Fiona smiled at him. About how grateful I am that you saw me crying and decided to help instead of looking away. Best decision I ever made, Vincent said simply. Best decision I ever made was saying yes when you asked me to marry you, even though we had only known each other a week, especially because of that. It showed I was finally learning to trust my instincts to recognize a good man when I met one. Fiona leaned against Vincent's shoulder. You were right about so many things. About the West being a place for second chances, about what matters being who you are now rather than who you were. You were right that I could build a new life here. We built it together, Vincent corrected gently. I may have helped you get started, but you did the hard work of actually starting over. You built your business, you made friends, you became part of this community. All I did was give you a chance. You gave me everything, Fiona insisted, and I want to make sure our children know that. Know that their father is the kind of man who helps people who need it, who keeps his promises, who builds up instead of tearing down. And I want them to know their mother is the kind of woman who survives despite everything trying to break her, who has the courage to start over, to trust again after being betrayed, to love even when love seems dangerous. Vincent kissed the top of her head. You are the strongest person I know, Fiona Brennan. They stayed on the porch until late, talking about their dreams for the ranch, for their children, for their future. When they finally went to bed, Fiona lay in Vincent's arms feeling utterly at peace. This was her life now. Not the one she had planned when she was a sheltered girl in St. Louis, but something so much richer and more real. She had faced her worst fear, had her life torn apart, had been forced to rebuild from nothing. And in doing so, she had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. More than that, she had discovered what real love looked like. Not the false promises and manipulation Richard had offered, but the steady, reliable, generous love that Vincent gave freely. Love that showed up every day in small acts of kindness and consideration. Love that did not demand or take, but gave and nurtured. Love that made her stronger instead of weaker. As she drifted off to sleep, Fiona sent up a silent prayer of thanks. Thanks for Vincent, for their children, for this life they had built together. Thanks for second chances and new beginnings. Thanks for the Wild West that had welcomed her and given her a home. And thanks for that moment on the stagecoach when she had been at her lowest, when Vincent had seen her tears and had the courage and compassion to step forward and help. That moment had changed everything, had set her on a path that led to more happiness than she had ever thought possible. Her burden had ended that day, just as Vincent had promised. And in its place, she had found love, family, and a future brighter than any she could have imagined. 15 years after Fiona first arrived in Clifton Hill, the Brennan family had become one of the most respected in the county. Their ranch had prospered, growing from the modest portion they had bought from Mr. Bradford into a substantial operation. Vincent's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher had attracted good workers, and the Double B brand was known for quality cattle. Henry was now 16, a young man who looked so much like Vincent that strangers often remarked on their resemblance. He was responsible and hardworking, already taking on significant duties around the ranch. Rose was 14, a beauty with her mother's dark hair and sharp intelligence. She was helping Fiona train new seamstresses and talking about someday opening a proper dress shop in town. James was 13, with his father's calm temperament and an unexpected talent for working with horses. Fiona stood on the porch of their expanded house, watching her family work together. Vincent and Henry were mending a fence in the near pasture. Rose was hanging laundry with the help of their housekeeper. James was in the corral working with a young colt, his patience and gentleness evident even from a distance. It was a scene of such ordinary domestic happiness that Fiona sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was real. This was her life. These were her people. This was her home. Mrs. Chen had passed away the previous winter, peacefully in her sleep. At her funeral, she had left Fiona a letter telling her how proud she was of the woman Fiona had become, how glad she was to have known her. Fiona kept that letter in a special box along with other precious things. The first letter Vincent had ever written her when he had to be away from the ranch. The tiny shoe Henry had worn as a baby. A ribbon Rose had won at the county fair for her sewing. Mrs. Ortega still ran the hotel in town and visited the ranch regularly. She had become like a grandmother to the children, spoiling them with sweets and stories. Mr. Bradford had passed away several years before, leaving Vincent a generous bequest in his will, along with a letter thanking him for being like the son he had never had. Clifton Hill had grown over the years. There was a proper schoolhouse now, a second general store, even a small lending library that Fiona had helped establish. The railroad had come through 5 years ago, connecting them more directly to Kansas City and St. Louis. The town was no longer quite the rough frontier settlement it had been when Fiona arrived, but some things remained the same. Maria's restaurant still served the best tamales around. The church where Fiona and Vincent had married still stood at the edge of town. And people still judged you by who you were and what you did, not by where you came from or what mistakes you might have made in your past. Mrs. Pemberton had finally died 3 years ago, bitter and alone to the end. Fiona had gone to the funeral out of a sense of duty, but she had felt only pity for the woman who had been so consumed by judgment, and spite that she had never found any happiness. These days, nobody in Clifton Hill questioned Fiona's respectability or Henry's parentage. She was Mrs. Brennan, successful businesswoman, devoted mother, and beloved wife. Her past in St. Louis felt like it had happened to someone else entirely, a story she had heard rather than lived. But she never forgot. Never forgot the shame and fear. Never forgot the desperation that had driven her to flee her home. Never forgot the tears she had cried on that stagecoach. She kept those memories not to torture herself, but to remind herself how far she had come, how much she had survived. And she never forgot Vincent's words, "That burden ends today." Those words had proven prophetic. Her burden had ended that day, replaced by a life full of love and purpose and joy. Everything she had lost when she left St. Louis, she had found again in a better, more authentic form here in Missouri. Vincent came walking up from the pasture, Henry beside him. Both were dusty and sweaty from their work, but they were smiling and talking animatedly about something. When Vincent saw Fiona on the porch, his face lit up the way it always did, even after all these years. "There is my beautiful wife," he called out, climbing the steps to kiss her cheek. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "Just counting my blessings," Fiona said, smiling at him. "Remembering how lucky I am." "We are the lucky ones," Henry said, surprising them both. He was usually a quiet boy, not given to such declarations. "You and Pa, you built something real here, something good. All the kids at school, they wish they had what we have." Fiona felt tears spring to her eyes. "That is a lovely thing to say, sweetheart." Henry shuffled his feet, suddenly awkward. I know you two work hard to give us this life. I wanted you to know we see it and appreciate it." Vincent clapped his son on the shoulder, pride evident on his face. "You are a good man, Henry. We are proud of you." After Henry went to wash up for dinner, Fiona turned to Vincent. "Did you hear that? He called you Pa." "He always calls me Pa," Vincent said, confused. "No, I mean." He said it like there was never any question, like you are simply his father, nothing complicated about it. Fiona's voice was thick with emotion. "I have always worried that someday he would feel differently, that he would resent not knowing his biological father. But he does not, does he? You are his father, completely and absolutely." Vincent pulled her close. I told you years ago, Fiona. The man who raises a child is the real father. Henry is mine, just like Rose and James are mine. There is no difference, no distinction. They are all my children. I know, I have always known. But hearing Henry say it like that, so matter of fact, it made me realize he knows it too. There is no confusion in his mind about who his father is. There should not be. I have been his father since before he was born. Vincent kissed her softly. You need to stop worrying about this. It is settled. It has been settled for years. Henry is a Brennan, born and raised, and nothing will ever change that. Fiona nodded, blinking back tears. You are right. I am being silly. You are being a mother worrying about your children. It is what you do. Vincent smiled. Now come on. I am starving and I smell roast chicken. Let us get our family together and eat. Dinner that night was noisy and chaotic in the best possible way. All three children talked over each other, sharing stories from their day. Rose was excited about a new design she was working on for a customer's dress. James wanted permission to enter the young colt in a competition at the county fair. Henry had been offered a job helping at a neighboring ranch during the summer, and he wanted to discuss whether he should take it. Fiona and Vincent listened and advised and teased, the easy banter of a family that genuinely enjoyed each other's company. After dinner, they all helped clean up, then gathered on the expanded porch to watch the sunset. This too had become a tradition, this evening time together before the children scattered to their own pursuits. It was the time when important things got discussed, when feelings got shared, when they stayed connected as a family. Ma, can I ask you something? Rose said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Of course, sweetheart. When you were my age, what did you want to be? I mean, did you always want to be a seamstress? Fiona considered how to answer. She had never told her children the full story of her past, had never explained exactly why she had left St. Louis. They knew she came from Missouri originally, that she had met their father shortly after arriving in Clifton Hill. But they did not know about Richard, about the scandal, about the shame. When I was your age, I wanted to be a wife and mother, Fiona said carefully. That was what girls from good families were expected to want. I did learn sewing because it was considered a proper accomplishment for a young lady, but I never imagined I would use it to earn a living. So, how did you end up here? James asked. Grandma Ortega said you came on the stagecoach by yourself, which seems strange. Did not ladies usually travel with family back then? Fiona glanced at Vincent, who gave her an encouraging nod. They had discussed this possibility, had agreed that when the children were old enough to ask real questions, they deserved real answers. I came by myself because my family had sent me away, Fiona said quietly. I had made mistakes, done things that brought shame on them, so they gave me money and a letter of introduction to a distant cousin and told me never to come back. The children were silent, processing this. Finally, Henry spoke. What kind of mistakes? The kind young people make when they trust the wrong person and believe lies instead of seeing truth. Fiona took a deep breath. There was a young man I thought I was going to marry. But he was not the person I thought he was, and when I realized I was pregnant with his child, he abandoned me. She could feel all three children staring at her, could sense them doing the math. Henry's face had gone pale. Henry, you already know your father, and I had only been married a short time when you were born, Fiona said gently. Your biological father was that young man who abandoned me. But Vincent is your real father, the one who chose to raise you, to love you, to be there for you every single day of your life. Henry looked at Vincent, his expression unreadable. Did you know? When you married Ma, did you know about me? I knew, Vincent said firmly, and I did not care. I loved your mother and I wanted to marry her. You were part of that package, and I was glad of it. I have never once regretted it, Henry, not for a single moment, so I am. Henry struggled with the words. I am not really a Brennan. You absolutely are a Brennan. Vincent stood up and moved to sit beside his son. Henry, listen to me. I am your father in every way that matters. I was there when you were born. I was the first person to hold you. I was the one who walked the floor with you when you cried at night. I taught you to ride. I taught you to work cattle. I taught you what it means to be a good man. Blood does not make a father. Love and commitment make a father. And I am your father, completely and absolutely. Does everyone know? Henry asked, his voice small. Does the whole town know I am a bastard? You are not a bastard, Fiona said sharply. And no, most people do not know or care. You have always been a Brennan. That is all anyone needs to know. Rose moved to her brother's other side, taking his hand. It does not change anything, Henry. You are still our brother. Pa is still our father. She is right, James added. Nothing is different. Henry sat quietly for a long moment, then looked at Vincent. Thank you for choosing me, for being my pa even when you did not have to be. Vincent pulled Henry into a tight hug. I have always wanted to be your pa, from the very beginning. You are my son, Henry. You always have been, and you always will be. Fiona watched through tears as her husband embraced her oldest child, as Rose and James moved closer to be part of the group hug. This was her family. Built not on lies or pretense, but on love and truth and choice. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Fiona and Vincent lay together in the darkness. You think he will be all right? Fiona asked. Henry, I mean. He seemed to take it well, but he will be fine. He is a strong kid, and he knows he is loved. That is what matters. Vincent pulled her close. I am glad we told them. It is better they know the truth from us than hear gossip somewhere else. You think the other children will be upset? Finding out their brother has a different biological father, did they seem upset? Vincent asked gently. They were immediately supportive, because to them, just like to me, Henry is simply their brother. The biology is irrelevant. Fiona nodded against his chest. You are right. I am worrying for nothing. You are a mother. Worrying is part of the job. Vincent kissed the top of her head. But Fiona, you need to stop carrying this like it is some terrible secret. It is just part of our story, part of how we became a family. It is nothing to be ashamed of. I know. It is just hard to let go of sometimes, that old fear of judgment. The only judgment that matters is from the people who love you, and we all think you are pretty wonderful. Fiona smiled in the darkness. I love you, Vincent Brennan. Have I told you that today? Only about 5 times. But I never get tired of hearing it. Good. Because I am going to keep saying it for the next 50 years. I am counting on it. They fell asleep in each other's arms, secure in their love and their family. Outside, the Missouri night was clear and full of stars, and the ranch settled into peaceful silence. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Henry did take that summer job at the neighboring ranch and proved himself so capable that he was offered a permanent position as a junior foreman. But he chose to stay at the family ranch instead, saying he wanted to help build the Brennan legacy. Rose opened her dress shop in town when she turned 18, fulfilling her dream of running her own business. She had inherited both her mother's skill with a needle and her father's head for business, and the shop was an immediate success. James surprised everyone by deciding he wanted to study veterinary medicine. Vincent and Fiona scraped together the money to send him to school in Kansas City, proud of their son's ambition and compassion for animals. Vincent and Fiona grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good cattle prices and successful harvests. They attended the weddings of their children and welcomed grandchildren with joy and wonder. Henry married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Vincent and Fiona 3 grandchildren. Rose married a banker from town, and they had 2 daughters. James met his wife at veterinary school, and they settled back in Clifton Hill to start a practice together. Through it all, Vincent and Fiona remained each other's constants. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, still talked about their days, still found ways to make each other laugh. The passion had mellowed into something deeper and more enduring, a love that had been tested by time and found to be unbreakable. On their 30th anniversary, Vincent took Fiona back to the spot by the river where he had proposed so many years before. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but when Vincent looked at Fiona, he still saw the frightened girl on the stagecoach who had captured his heart. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" he asked, echoing the question he had asked on their 6th anniversary. "That my burden ends today," Fiona replied with a smile. "How could I forget? Those words changed my life. Do you think about it much anymore? That time, I mean. The shame you felt." Fiona considered this carefully. "Not often. Sometimes something will remind me and I will think about how different things could have been, but mostly it just feels like ancient history, like it happened to someone else. Because you are not that person anymore. You have not been for a very long time. No, I am not. That girl on the stagecoach was broken and scared. I am neither of those things now." Fiona took Vincent's hand. "You fixed me, Vincent. You took all my broken pieces and helped me put them back together into something stronger than before. You fixed yourself. I just loved you while you did it." They sat together watching the river flow, just as they had done so many times over the years. The water moved endlessly past, constant and changing all at once, a perfect metaphor for their life together. "I want you to know something," Fiona said quietly. "If I could have known, back on that stagecoach, what my future would hold, I would not have cried at all. I would have been smiling because I was heading toward the best thing that ever happened to me." Vincent's eyes were suspiciously bright. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." "It is the truth. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vincent. You and our children and this life we built together. All of it started because you were kind enough to help a stranger, because you saw someone in pain and decided to do something about it. I saw someone worth helping, worth loving, worth building a life with." Vincent cupped her face in his hands. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat, Fiona. Every moment, every choice, every challenge, because it led me here to this moment with you." They kissed in the fading light. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. 2 people who proved that second chances were real, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that the burden really could end today if you found the right person to help you carry it. As they rode back to the ranch, Fiona thought about everything that had happened since that day 30 years ago when she had arrived in Clifton Hill pregnant, unmarried, and terrified. She thought about the life she had built, the family she had raised, the love she had found. She thought about the Wild West that had given her a home, about the small Missouri town that had accepted her, about the man who had seen past her shame to the person she really was. She thought about how the worst moment of her life had somehow led to the best moments, how rock bottom had been the foundation on which she had built everything that mattered. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that her burden had ended that day. The day she rode the stagecoach carrying her shame, the day the cowboy saw her tears and said that burden ends today. The day Vincent Brennan changed her life forever by offering her kindness, love, and a future she had never dared to dream of. That burden had ended, and in its place, she had found everything she had ever truly needed. love, family, home, and the knowledge that she was strong enough to survive anything. As the sun set over their ranch, over the land they had worked and the home they had built, Fiona knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, with the man she was meant to love, living the life she was meant to live. And that, she thought with a smile, was the greatest gift of all.